All right. Good morning, everyone. I am Marjorie Schuster, and I'm happy to welcome you to our Women on the Move Female Author Series. I'm sure this is working. This is our third year of our series, and today we're going to meet with our 34th and 35th author. And in the next 6 weeks, we'll meet 9 fabulous authors and enjoy many, many terrific conversations. As always, I'd like to thank the Samuel I. Newhouse Foundation for their support of this series. Our authors today are 2 of the most engaging and clever women writing today. Jane Rosen is an author and a screenwriter, and her book, A Shoe Story, is her second and such an enjoyable read. The Most Likely Club is Elyssa Friedland's 5th book. Both of these books really get to the heart of women. They're so relatable. They have human stories. There's so much to talk about. Our moderator today is Jordana Horn. She's host of the podcast Call Your Mother on Queller.com and a new podcast called Characters on the Couch. I'm sure nobody needs this direction any longer, but if you have any questions, write your questions in the chat feature of Zoom, and we'll try to get to just as many as we can. It is now my great pleasure to welcome Jane, Elyssa, and Jordana. Hello, Jordana.
Hi, Marjorie.
Hi, Jane.
Hello.
Hi. It says
Hello.
that I can't share my video. Ah, here we go. Great. Okay, so great start.
Hello, ladies. I'm sure you'll have a fabulous conversation. I'll say goodbye for a bit and enjoy yourselves.
Thanks so much, Marjorie.
Thank you.
And thank you both, Elyssa and Jane, for coming on. I'm going to have some questions for both of you together and some for you separately, but please, if I ask Jane a question that intrigues you, Elyssa, and vice versa, please speak up. I'd love to make this more of a conversation. So I'll start with one together. Elyssa, you can answer first. I wanted to address the fact that both of your most recent books, A Shoe Story and The Most Likely Club, are books about how all the plans that we make for life sort of inevitably derail in one way or another. Can you talk a little bit about what motivated you to write books facing the gulf between expectation and reality?
I think for me, it comes down to the age that my children are right now. They're 14, 12, and 9. And so, I started The Most Likely Club, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. So maybe my son was 11 or 12. It's an age where I start to have really vivid memories of being that age. And so when I parent him and my daughter, it's different now because I remember, of course, I didn't have TikTok and Snapchat, but it's like kind of the same story, but through a different medium, And of course, like it's triggering all these memories for me of when they come home and they're like, you don't understand, this person was so mean to me and everybody follows her around and I have no way to fight back and then everyone will turn on me and this and that. And I'm like picturing that person from my school. I'm like, oh, person is like a total loser now. You got nothing to worry about, And so they're sort of like the way people turn out, it's very different than we expect, including ourselves and our own goals change, and like what I thought I wanted for myself in high school, is very different than what I want now. And so when I listen to my kids talk about what they want to be when they grow up and what they're looking for, I know how much that's going to evolve. And I think if there's like anything in the world that like drove that point home about the unexpected, it's COVID. Like we just went through, hopefully that won't become a regular thing, but like best laid plans, doesn't matter what you thought was going to happen in the next year. And I have started to be I'm living a lot more like in the last minute now, because even yesterday, like I'm on the phone with my mom and she's trying to coordinate plans, regarding some out of town family for my daughter's bat mitzvah in 6 weeks. And I was like, we're wasting our breath. Like, let's talk about it a week in advance because so-and-so could end up with COVID and so-and-so's flight could get delayed and so-and-so could, and who knows what. And the world could be upside down by then. And so it's like, so on a macro level and on a micro level, I feel like I've come to expect the unexpected. So I hope that answered your question.
That's a great answer. Yeah. Jane, what about you?
Okay, well, I'm just trying to remember the question, but
talking about the gulf between reality and expectations and how that's reflected in your book.
I think for me, I I wanted to write about resilience in this character. And I think that life throws something at everybody, right? There's no one really that gets away scot-free. And it doesn't mean you can't regroup and reapproach and reanalyze where you are in life. And I just wanted to show a young woman who had one idea of what her life was going to be like, which we do at that young age. You graduate college and you think this is what your life is going to be like. But there are so many options. And I see that, as Elyssa was saying about her own children, I see that with my kids who just all graduated, in the past couple of years, and how, yes, COVID, yes, other things, they thought things would go one way and they all switched gears. And I just thought it was an interesting take.
Yeah, very much so. And I will be talking to you more about your protagonist in a little bit, Jane, but I want to kind of pivot to, in A Shoe Story, you focus very lovingly on secondary characters, this story of Cy and Lena, this star-crossed Jewish couple that's separated over World War II, and their lives go in totally different directions. I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't read it, so I won't say the end of the sentence that I wrote down there. Was this based at all on a real relationship, and were you thinking at all about the idea about the gulf between expectations and reality through the lens of aging?
Yes, I was, and it was very much based on a real relationship. Cy and Lena's story is very much my parents' story. Oh, wow. Except for the fact that my parents got married and had 4 children. So I took my parents' meet cute of literally exactly, my mother was wealthy. She lived in a huge home in Brooklyn. My father was poor. His father had passed away. He only had this sailboat where she met him. And she literally left Rosh Hashanah with her friend Mel Schott and rode her bicycle to Sheepshead Bay with him and met my father. So it's actually the story. My mom was still alive when I wrote that part of the story. So she really told me so many details about Brooklyn in that time, in the 30s, and where they'd go and where they'd eat and what they do. And it was so much fun for me to write that part of it and to be with them during that. And in addition, I'm going too far, but his World War II story is exactly a replica of my father's in the Coast Guard.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't even know that. No, but you definitely feel when you're reading it, the love for these characters and for this story. It comes across very clearly. And Elyssa, that makes me turn back to you, because I think that a lot of your work has played with something that for lack of a better phrase, or maybe there is one that I don't know, like this Jewish nostalgia, particularly in Last Summer at the Golden Hotel or the Floating Feltmans. And so I'd love to hear more about the role that Jewish identity plays in your life and in your work. And Jane, I'd like to hear that from you too.
So Jewish identity, it plays a huge role in my life, taking out all the author, the book stuff that I do. I grew up in a very Jewish town in New Jersey, Livingston, New Jersey. I think at one point we were members of 3 synagogues. My parents, very traditional, come from 4 Holocaust survivor grandparents. And my parents were actually born in both of them were born in displaced persons camps in Europe after the war and came here, lived in Brooklyn. I went to Jewish day school my whole life through 12th grade in New Jersey. And then and I also went to Camp Ramah, which we were talking about before. I went to Camp Ramah in the Berkshires. And then I went to Yale for college. And it was the first time I really even met people that weren't Jewish, which was super interesting for me, made me kind of reevaluate my Judaism and what it meant to me, because it's the first time where it wasn't just a given that everyone around me was Jewish. And I developed a much wider circle of friends. And I also sort of learned that I consider myself not observant because we didn't keep Shabbat, but we knew people who did. And then I got to Yale and I was a lot of Jewish people haven't even heard of any of the holidays other than Rosh Hashanah, and I just and there's no judgment on any side. It just got me thinking. Like I just became more intellectual, I would say, about my Judaism and more curious about it. And, you know, I live in New York City now, plenty of Jews around. My kids went to Temple Emanu-El nursery school and then went on to Road of Shalom for school, like a lot of Judaism. And so, you know, there's like, of course, a temptation to write what you know. And I know Judaism, or I know my Judaism, I should say. And it's where I'm comfortable. I think that I come from, like, I have a very Jewish sense of humor, I would say. And I think that humor has like saved me in my life from like some difficult times that I've had that my family has faced. And like, it's like, I credit humor for getting me through it. And I credit my Judaism for my humor, because I think there's like a particular, you know, sense of humor that's very Jewish. And so I really enjoy using it in my books and like celebrating Jewish culture and Jewish identity in my stories. I mean, it's not in every one of my books, and it's not always, you know, there's always some element of Judaism, and some it's center stage and some it's like a little bit more in the background, but it's like a compulsion of mine to put it into every book, at least a little bit. I don't know, it's important to me. I don't know why. And it's been well received by Jews and non-Jews alike, so there's no reason to stop.
No, I mean, Jews do read books. That's
we are the
that's
people
part of our you know. Yeah, go ahead, Jane. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, no, Jews do read books. That's a very true statement. I think from my own experience, I think that culturally I was brought up very aware of my Judaism, meaning like my mother would take me to the Lower East Side to buy everything, even though we lived in Long Island, you know, to just the bra lady, you know, and the sock man, the pickle man, and all of those things, which I have a lot of in a shoe story. I grew up going just to Friday night services. My father, who I wrote about in the book, passed away when I was 11. And I think after that, my Judaism became much more important to me because it was this connection to him. Not that he was religious. He wasn't. He used to, you know, skip out of shul and eat tuna fish on Yom Kippur. But it was like going to shul and saying the Kaddish, and like it gave me this connection to him that I needed at 11. And I really, that part of Judaism is so important to me because I think Jews do death really well. And it was very helpful in my life. But like Elyssa said, I think the humor, the Jewish humor, I think now in this crazy environment, I feel when I portray Judaism in my books, which just like Elyssa is not everywhere, but it is in some and not in others. But I feel like it's important to show people who aren't Jewish, maybe, you know, what goes on and it's that we're not all the stereotypes that people say that we are, that we're just like everyone else. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's important, more important now than ever, I think, to have some Jewish characters in books. And now, as I told you before, my oldest daughter is becoming a cantor. So it's brought an entire new level of our Judaism. Like we actually went to see her at the high holidays, which was unbelievable. So we've all been elevated a little in my family because of it.
I love that. That's great. Elyssa, so I guess I've been remiss because I feel that I'm so deeply immersed in the books of the people that I'm interviewing that sometimes I don't appreciate that there are a lot of people who come to the Zoom because they're curious, they're author curious, and maybe they haven't read your most recent book. So maybe if each one of you could give just the quick elevator pitch for your book. Jane, I'll let you go first, just for your most recent one, and then we'll go back into the questions.
Okay, well, I just want to say that I've written 3 books. So Margie had said 2, and this is the one that was next. Eliza Starts a Rumor.
Which I love.
Just saying. And I have another book coming out May 23rd called On Fire Island, which I am crazy excited for. But my last book, A Shoe Story, is the story of Esme Nash, who graduates college and her whole life is turned upside down. She was supposed to have like gone to New York City, lived with her college boyfriend, had a job at an art gallery. Everything's turned upside down. 7 years later, she returns and experiences 1 month in the city with a closet full of designer shoes. it sounds like it's all fun and games and light, but it's not. There's heavier issues. And there's also this entire, she befriends Cy, who we just spoke about. And he tells her his life story to help her choosing her own life story, which is now out in the open for her. So that's the story, basically.
And it's very good. I love
it. It is very good.
Excellent book. I loved it. Tore through it in I think a day and a half tops.
I feel the same about Alyssa's last book. It was so fun.
Thank you. So this is my latest book, The Most Likely Club. It came out in September of this year. So it's a very new book, and it's about 4 women who grew up in Connecticut and went to a small private school in Connecticut, and they were best friends in high school. And you get a sense of them in the beginning of the book, what they were like in high school, and then it flashes forward 25 years to their high school reunion. And 3 of the 4 of them reunite at the reunion, and of course, all those angsty feelings of what it's like to be back on the campus where you were, the 17-year-old insecure, stupidly optimistic person you were. And they really take stock of their lives at this 25th reunion and vow to make major changes in their lives and live up to their high school superlatives that they had in the yearbook, which is why it's called the Most Likely Club. So they try to live up to their most likelies, but obviously it's not very easy to completely right the ship of your life in middle age. And so it's super funny. It's definitely a friendship story. It's like a very realistic look at middle age and how our expectations change and what we want out of life and what we expect from the people around us. Definitely hits home how hard it is to be in the sandwich generation, caring for parents and children at the same time, and just how difficult it is to make any changes in your life that are significant when you're so tired at the end of the day just from getting through your job, your errands, making dinner, doing the laundry, responding to emails, that you barely have time to watch 5 minutes of a TV show, let alone reevaluate if you're happy in your marriage, your job, all those big things. So that's The Most Likely Club.
Great. Thank you. That was terrific. And it provided such a seamless segue into my next question for you, which was that all these characters are rethinking where their lives have gone and where they want them to go. Selfishly, I am a former lawyer myself who is still hopefully transitioning into being one day an author. But I wanted to ask if you could tell us about your own personal life transformation, because you took a turn in your professional life when you became a writer.
Yeah, no, definitely. So writing was something I always enjoyed as a hobby from the time I was like 5. As soon as I could read and write, like I was creating little books with my friends, on scratch paper, and I loved it. And I did the high school newspaper, then I did the Yale Daily News, and I was like deep into writing. I thought maybe I'd be a journalist, and then I kind of chickened out. I was like, I don't really know how to do that. Like I wasn't sure, like the newspapers don't come to campus to recruit the way like the investment banks do, and I didn't know, I couldn't, first of all, like financially, I couldn't just graduate and become a novelist, I couldn't just sit in Starbucks every day and write a book. Like that wasn't financially feasible for me. And it was also like not the path I'd been on. I'd been on this like, get A's, do well in your SATs, get into this school. Like it was like this just climbing this ladder. And it was like, suddenly I didn't know what to do. And I feel like as much as I love Yale, and by the way, like I'm back there, I teach there now, I teach writing, like I love the place, and maybe the career services has gotten a lot better. But like at the time I was like, if you don't want to go into investment banking, like what do you do? Like there's no one to hold my hand. And I ended up applying to law school because it really just felt safe. I was like, I understand the application process. Like I did that for college. Like I understand studying for the LSAT. I studied for the SAT. Like I knew how to write an essay. I knew how to apply. And I was like, it'll buy me 3 more years. And I feel like you do hear a lot like, oh, you'll never regret having a law degree. It's such a useful degree in life. I'm not sure like I would say that. And so, but I'm actually happy to say that I don't really feel like I use it at all, because that's part of like the message in the Most Likely Club. Like not everything has to lead to something else, and like some misdirections and some like rights and left turns along the way, not just walking straight the whole way. Like there's value in that. And even if there isn't, like, we're not perfect. Like we can't always know exactly what to do next. And so like, if you spend a few years like doing something and then only to discover that that's not what you want, like that's okay. And it's like the first time in my life that I'd ever like actually done something that I'm like, probably shouldn't have gone to law school. You know, like I didn't really like being a lawyer. I only lasted 3 years. It was really expensive to go, obviously. And I did enjoy being back. Like that part I loved, being a student. But yeah, I mean, I was like pretty miserable at the law firm, even though like I worked at a very nice place, but just like wasn't intellectually interesting to me. I didn't care about the clients. Like I didn't like billable hours. It just wasn't like the way I operate. And I'm really creative, and it just like didn't call on my creativity, you know? And so I quit. But like, I want to be super honest that like when I quit, I was already married. I had financial security from my husband. Like it's like super important to me and especially now that I'm back at Yale teaching writing, like I don't want to present this like I just had this moment where I woke up and was like, I should be a writer, you know? I probably wouldn't have done that if like it meant like moving out of my apartment and like moving back in with my parents and, you know, giving up my income and everything, you know? So I had stability that enabled me to pursue writing. I'm really lucky, and because I couldn't be happier as a writer. It's like, this is the job I was meant to do, but the circumstances aligned that enabled me to pursue it.
Right. Right. And, you know, you touched on something in your answer talking about that nothing is perfect and that nobody is perfect. And I think that a common denominator in your work and Jane's is this idea that there's this undercurrent. I mean, I haven't been a man, but I'm going to say, so I'm going to just say from my personal experience in women's lives of these undercurrents of tension that we feel throughout our lives. And I think that there are certain issues that with which many women can relate. I think, Jane, you know, your book addresses addiction in a lot of different forms, you know, whether it's alcoholism or consumerism. And those are two things that I'd love for you to talk more about, you know, as it, like we can say jokingly, like, oh, you know, like people love shoes, but there's an undercurrent of what the desire for acquisition can mean. And then, Elyssa, I found that in some of your work, you know, this idea of women being haunted by their physicality and by their physical selves, whether it's Melissa's eating and dieting issues in Most Likely Club and her thoughts about her daughter's weight and how that will make her interact with those in the world around her, or, you know, in the intermission, which I'm just in now. So talking about the protagonist's awareness of age's imminent effect on like her marketability to men. So I'd love for each of you to talk about what struck a chord in you with these particular, I don't want to, if it didn't, you can say that too, but it comes across in your work as being something that's very important and under the surface. So Jane, I'll start with you and then we can move to Elyssa.
I'm happy to say there's really no addiction in my, you know, immediate family, but I have friends that I've watched go through it on all different ends. In other words, like their kids, their husbands, themselves, all these different things. And when I started thinking about like what happened to Esme's dad, what happened, you know, like and I don't want to go into that, it gives things away, but
right.
I just wanted to research it. And I started, again, I don't want to give things away. I went and I attended some meetings on Zoom with a friend that was going to them. And I really said, wow, this is like so substantive. Like it's what goes on and the support and all of this. And I just found it to be an interesting topic. Again, I don't like to just write fluff books with nothing in them of any substance. And I just felt like it was a great avenue to explore. So really nothing that personal in terms of my own life, but personal in terms of many people's lives.
Right.
So I would say, you know, with the weight issues, I have, since my daughter's in middle school, and like that's such an awkward time for girls and their bodies. Like I wanted to be very transparent in the book that I think that it is hard for moms, parents and moms in particular, probably, if they see their daughter suffering with a weight issue. And it's like, you just can't say or do the right thing. And I wanted to be very open about that, because if you say nothing, then maybe the problem will get worse, and your daughter will be, or your son, could be just getting more unhealthy, and kids are like super sedentary these days and just like on their phones all the time. And it's really hard, to watch that. But if you don't say anything, it can get worse. If you do say something, you can really alienate them. It's like such a fraught topic. Like it's just really tricky to know what to say. And in the case of In the Most Likely Club, Melissa, the mom, like she herself, struggled with her weight when she was in high school. And the message there was like, I think that the things that happen to us that we are insecure about when we're at a vulnerable age, like they stay with you forever. So you might totally overcome like if you, let's say you were, clinically overweight, and then you're totally not as an adult, but you'll always feel like a certain insecurity about your body. But it could be something else. You could have had like a stutter when you were young, and you go to speech therapy and you were able to, overcome your stutter, but like you still hear it. Like you still feel self-conscious. You still think that when you run into someone, from your past, that the only thing they think of is like, oh, that's the kid that stuttered, it's just a really vulnerable age. And so on the one hand, like I would like to, tell my kids like, oh, nothing that happens in middle school and high school really matters. And to some extent, it's true. You might never see some of these people again. And like, you have a million chances to reinvent yourself. On the other hand, like some of the injuries that happen to you in that age really can stay with you, and they can haunt you for a really long time. And so I hear it all the time. Like I will see people, men and women, sort of like eating in a very obsessively, worried about their weight, and like, everything, this dressing on the side, no sugar, no carbs, this and that. And to me, they're like super thin. I might say to them or to their partner, like, what's going on here? And like the answer is always like, I was a fat kid when I was younger. And it's like, they might be 55 years old now, and they're like still terrified, because of like what was once their identity and something that bothered them. And so I, like Jane, I write funny books, but like they also have serious themes in them, like they're thought provoking. And like I like to imagine people at a book club thinking like, what would they talk about in my book? And like I think if there are one or two really sort of like polarizing topics or things that like would really get the juices going, like that would be my goal. Like I wouldn't want to write a book where it's just like, oh, that was really, really funny, but like then what would you talk about? Like retell the jokes,
Right. What have you both been most surprised by in terms of reader reactions to your books? And that can go beyond this particular new book to your previous work as well. And by the way, I'm going to throw it out there explicitly that I very much recommend that everybody go back and read all of their previous books as well, because they are fabulous, really, across the board. Yeah.
Thank you. It's funny because Elyssa and I talk about this. We like bonded over this exact question, the reader responses, because, and I hate to get into the negative because there's been so much positive for both of us, but sometimes people write things on like Goodreads or Amazon and they're caustic. And it's like, you could review a vacuum cleaner on Amazon, and you could write, it doesn't suck or it sucks or whatever you would want to write about a vacuum cleaner. But
I think a vacuum cleaner is supposed to suck though. So
right.
Maybe that's different. But anyway, go on.
That was my joke, but
sorry.
But the vacuum cleaner's not going to read it. You know what I mean? Like people don't realize that there are human beings that wrote the book and therefore will read your review. So it's just shocking sometimes when people say things. Like I just had someone, her name is Maria. She said, basically, I loved the book, A Shoe Story, but there are two mistakes. One, people can't study abroad in Cuba. And two, the Coast Guard only goes around the United States of America, not Europe. So now you can't respond. Both those things are completely incorrect. You know, you can study abroad in Cuba. And my father was in the Coast Guard in World War II and went all over Europe and Africa. But you can't respond. So it's just like a frustrating thing. And sometimes the comments are a lot worse. Like, you know, did not finish after 10 pages or, you know, whatever it is. It's just hard to.
Right. I threw the book across the room.
Yes,
you know.
yes. But then on the other hand, the people that write me and say how much they love my books, I adore it. I love when someone goes on Instagram and writes me a personal message. I just finished your book. It makes my day. It's just so nice that readers love my books. And it's just, honestly, it's like the most joyful part of being a writer I was a screenwriter before this. So I never had any interaction with people like that. And this is an amazing thing. I love it. So my point is just write good reviews. No.
I agree with everything Jane said. And we did bond over like one of the meanest reviews I've ever come across of my book that was just really below the belt. And of course, by reading it, because it was so insane, you know, and
early, it was very early.
Cool. Like I was able to say, I think the issue resides more with the reader than with the book. Not to say that there aren't valid criticisms, of course they are, but just this, you know, the tone implied like there was more going on with the reader. But as Jane said, the positive reviews make it worth it. Like people take the time to reach out to us on Instagram and Facebook and say how much they enjoyed the work and maybe share a particular part that they liked or related to, or that they bought the gift, you know, they bought the book as a gift for someone in their lives that they knew would enjoy it. And that feels so amazing. You get messages that say, oh, my friend's in the hospital and I brought her your books because they're really funny and I knew that they would cheer her up. Can't really ask for more than that. And I would say one of those compensates for 5 mean ones. You know, it's sort of a 1 to 5 ratio of like.
I'm so surprised by your answers, only because I did not anticipate that it would be, for lack of a better term, the haters that would have this kind of splinter sort of impact on you. And so I guess that transitions to the question of, you know, that's very much endemic to the age in which we live, in both in terms of people's freeness with their random, not always the kindest opinions, but also in terms of your accessibility as an author, as opposed to, you know, a generation ago where you writing, I mean, that person would have had to, you know, go to the effort of putting pen to paper, getting a stamp, finding the address of your publisher. I mean, that would be like a lot of effort to put in. And so do you like having that kind of more open channel to your reader? Or would you, if you could, would you rather be in more of that set apart kind of space?
I mean, for me, I like having it in general. I think if I weight it, you know, good or bad. And also, I think during COVID, when Elyssa Starts a Rumor came out, if it was not for Bookstagram, which is like, if you don't know, the huge Instagram book followers, I don't know if I would have sold any books, to be honest. I mean, they took on Elyssa Starts a Rumor and plastered it all over Instagram. And, you know, no one was going to a bookstore. No one could see all the like blurbs that I had to work so hard to get, you know, so, or the cover, anything. So it was very helpful. So I would have to say I'm a fan.
Yeah, I would overall agree. The vast majority of the people I've connected with online have been really pleasant, really interesting. I consider them friends, even if I haven't met them in person, some of them, because we really have corresponded back and forth a lot. And I like it. Also, writing a book is really solitary. So that's we have the relationships with other authors, like my friendship with Jane, which is really meaningful. We really lean on each other, especially of late, and we're at the same imprint, we're at the same publisher, and it feels really good that we have each other. And that's like a few writers that we're friends with, but we have a much wider network when we include our readers that we're able to connect with. So overall, it's a positive thing. It's weird. It's like the only way we know, because both of us have really only been writing in this era. And I can imagine for writers who have had longer writing careers than us, you know, as novelists who've maybe been at this for 30 years, that would be a very interesting question to ask them, to be able to compare and contrast, like what it was like, you know, writing a book in 1990 versus today, when, you know, everyone can give you their opinion very, very easily and very directly. So overall, though, I like it because there's so many hours where I'm just sitting alone at my computer typing that I really value the interaction. And
that's what I wanted to ask you too, is that I would say it comes across in your writing that both of you are people, because you show that you've connected really very well with emotions and with the way that people speak and the way that people think. And so I wanted to ask you if the solitariness of being a writer is hard for you.
I will say for me, it's not so difficult, because while the only thing I do miss about the law firm was the office, I did like going in, and I am always amazed by how many people want to work from home post-COVID, that they're not rushing back to the office, because I even rented an office as a writer, and just like having people that I see. I like to leave my house. I like to be around people. You're absolutely right that you've identified me as a people person. But I also don't disconnect while I'm writing. Some people, in order to write, turn off their Wi-Fi and, you know, put their phone on silent. I don't need to do that in order to write. So I'm actually chatting like throughout the day. You know, I'll pick up the phone when a friend calls, talk to my mom. I'm text messaging during the day. So I don't really feel like terribly alone while I'm writing.
And Jane, you?
I think I'm very similar. I don't really feel that alone. I do like to force myself to leave the house. I could literally stay in my bedroom and write for 7 hours, and my husband will come in and be like, get out of bed or you're out of your mind. But, and I make myself go to a coffee shop or just be around people. I think that also gives you ideas. You're certainly not going to like have things click in your head when you're just sitting at home. So it's a balance. You just really have to balance. I guess it depends like what part am I up to? You know, if I have a deadline on Friday, no, I probably will not move from my dining room table. But if I'm starting thinking about new books, I try and get out there as much as I can, because you just see and hear things everywhere you go, especially in New York City. Right. So it's a balance.
What are both of you reading right now, and what do you find particularly resonates with you as writers when you read fiction? I also would like to hear what TV shows you like to watch too. And Elyssa, I'd like you to confirm my suspicion that you enjoy Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah, of course. And I'm affectionately known as Mrs. Maisel in some circles. So I take as a huge compliment. Sure. Let's see. I happen to be reading an amazing book that is not out yet. Just as writers, we are often given advanced copies. And so I taught a writer's workshop at Stony Brook College in 2018. And then I was contacted 6 months ago by someone who took my class. And she said, I wrote a book and I'm getting it published. Would you read it? And she sent it to me, and it's blowing me away. I love it. It's called Our Best Intentions. It's being published by HarperCollins in the spring, and I can't put it down. So that's a great book to look out for this spring, Our Best Intentions. The author's name is Vibhuti Jain. She's an Indian American author who lives in South Africa. And wow. I'm loving that. I'm also big into audiobooks. So I happen to be listening to the first of the Neapolitan novels, My Brilliant Friend, the Elena Ferrante. And it's great. I love the narrator. Her voice is wonderful. It's very like pleasing to listen to, and it's a great story. And then for TV, I am very into TV. I happen to love true crime, and my husband dug up the most amazing Dateline with this Jewish woman. I mean, it sounds terrible because I'm like amazing when she was killed, so that like comes across wrong. But this woman in Colorado who was killed, her husband's Jewish, she was Jewish. So like the murder happened the day of the Purim Carnival, and it is like the best 2-hour Dateline ever. So we have like 30 minutes left of that. But in general, I love the show Hacks with Jean Smart. I'm caught up to date on that. I watch The Handmaid's Tale, which is great. I love an author friend of mine, Carola Lovering, wrote a book called Tell Me Lies, and it was made into a show on Hulu. And I'm watching that right now and wait like every week for the next episode to come out. It's so good. And I think that's about it. And I would say, just to plug, like my favorite book I read this summer was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Not that I need to plug that book because it was a major New York Times bestseller. So really plug like something under the radar, but it was my favorite book of the summer. So I love to recommend it.
And Jane?
I just finished, like Elyssa said, we get books to blurb, and I just finished blurbing for Annabelle Monaghan. I don't know if you read Nora Goes Off Script, but that was a fantastic book. Her new book's, I think, same time next summer. I just read that, and I loved it. And I'm anxiously awaiting Danny Shapiro's Signal Fires to come for my Ellen Hildebrand book club. It should be here today or tomorrow, and that's what I'm reading next. Television. So I fall asleep to Mad Men almost every night. I've seen it 6 times through. I fall asleep pretty quickly after a TV show goes on. So it's like a funny thing that we do where I fall asleep 10 minutes in. So I know what's going to happen. But what else? I've been watching The Bear. Have you seen that?
Yes.
The Good Fight. I love. I do watch television. I don't know why I'm coming up with the blank. My favorite show of all of COVID was called The Restaurant. Swedish, and it was amazing. I would definitely recommend that. Yeah, I like The Gilded Age. It's fun to see New York in the 1800s. That's what I got.
That's good stuff. And I hate the question, what's your next book? Because I do feel we live in a what's next culture that's always looking to the next thing. So I'm going to ask the more general and diplomatic question, although I do want Jane to plug her imminent May release as well. What's percolating with you right now?
I'm personally in major percolating stage right now. I'm like all about my next book after the Fire Island one. I'm like reading stuff and watching stuff and trying so hard to figure something out, but I am in no way ready to. I haven't even told my editor yet, so I'm going to step back from that question. But on Fire Island, I will pull up the cover for you. It's coming out May 23rd. I met my husband on Fire Island. I've been going there forever. That's the cover.
Beautiful.
It's pretty. And this book is so close to my heart. It's about 3 generations of men, but it's told through the wife of one of their, the eyes of one of their wives who just passed away. And it sounds like it's not uplifting, but it's very uplifting. It's very filled with Jewish thoughts on the afterlife, which I took like a 6-week class with this rabbi in London to learn about, you know, the whole Kabbalistic view of the afterlife. And so basically she's the narrator, and it's their one summer after she passes away. And I just love it. Honestly, it's the most special thing I've ever written, if I have to say so myself.
Great. I love that. I'm going to remind the audience that if they have questions, please put them in the chat. They'll be filtered over to me. And I'm going to start asking some of those questions now. Elizabeth,
let me say what I'm working on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I cut you off. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to plug my children's book.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So this book is coming out in February 7th. It's called The Museum of Lost Teeth, and I'm very excited about it. It was inspired by the tooth fairy notes that I would leave for my children when they would lose teeth. And so it tells the story of where the teeth go after the tooth fairy collects them. And so that's February 7th. I'm excited because it's like a new world for me. don't know anything about the children's book world and marketing those books. And I imagine I will meet a lot of cute kids. So I'm excited for that. And I just started working on my next novel. It's called The Jackpotters, and it's coming out summer 2024. And it is about a Jewish family. So
I'm so sorry to have cut you off.
No problem.
I didn't mean to. All right. So then I will give you the first comment, which is Yonina says, Elyssa, I'm Yale 87 and a mother of a Yale 23 here. And your words about Yale just sparked memories of my own experience. And Susan says, I loved your book. My parents eloped to the Catskills in the 1950s. And of course, my parents had to bring out the pictures. I brought them to talk about it. So thank you. It was wonderful. So that's some more good feedback for you.
Thanks. Thank you.
So another question that we have is Elizabeth asks of both of you, I live in a small community in the Midwest with about 100 Jewish families. Have you ever considered writing about that experience? It seems like there are many different Jewish stories that could be written about that kind of experience.
It's a good idea. Maybe we'll do it together.
We should,
but I think we both didn't have that experience at all. She should write it.
I think it's one of the things of writing books with a lot of Jewish content is I've been on book tour to many Jewish communities across the country. And so that I don't feel equipped to write about those communities. I'll just say that I agree the experience is really different, clearly. And I've traveled to JCCs all over the country and have been shocked just how culturally different, like we're all Jews, but I've been to Texas a lot, in different parts, even Texas, different parts of Texas, like the Jews are really different from each other. And I've, JCC of Omaha and JCCs in the Midwest and St. Louis and even the East Coast versus the West Coast of Florida. Like I can't, I think that just like when I was in high school, I thought the whole world was Jewish. Like then even as I got older, I still thought like all Jews were the same. And so I'm really grateful the book tour has taken me to Jewish communities across the country and shown me that there are really vast cultural differences. And I just will say one story of like visiting a Jewish community in Texas, in Dallas. And I remember my host that I was assigned to drive me around. She was like, do you want to see Dallas? I'll drive you around. I was like, sure. I mean, the woman couldn't get enough with the football field. She was like, and this is this high school's football field and that high school football field. And I was like, this woman's Jewish? Like, who cares about football? Like, I was so, and she was talking like high school teams, like not the Dallas Cowboys, but it was like this public school, like this, and this, my daughter's a cheerleader and this, and the high school. I'm so proud of the football fields. And she was like, awesome, the nicest. I adored her. And I was like, whoa. And then I was in Houston and I went in and there was, I think it was Houston. It was either Houston or Dallas. Now I'm forgetting, but there was like, a lot of South African Jews were concentrated there. And I had no idea that they're like that particular city, like attracted a lot of South African Jews. Then I walk into the house and there's like bronzed cowboy boots everywhere. And sometimes I get scared when that kind of thing happens because I feel like my own experience is so singular that it does make me a little bit nervous to write about anything that's not like exactly in my wheelhouse because I only know my little corner of the world, which is a little sad.
Right.
Yes. And it's very hard now. You're really like, it's very like limiting what people want you to write about. And I don't want to just write about Jewish girls from Long Island, but it sometimes feels like everything else is supposed to be like not in my wheelhouse, like you said, which is hard to balance.
Right. Right. No, that's an interesting point is that, being faced with the ways in which our experiences are universal and the ways in which they're not. Jocelyn has a question. She wants to know if you think that men have similar feelings but can't change their professions.
I would assume they feel similarly about, you get to a certain point in your life and you're like day in, day out doing the exact same thing and just like they're also stuck in a rut or like don't have the financial freedom to quit and change lanes. So I would imagine it's similar. I mean, they're exhausted at the end of the day also. Maybe they're not juggling like the mental load of a mom is just like freaking enormous, you know? And I do sometimes like think that my husband's lucky. He's just able to think about, you know, just his job. Whereas like I'm working and I'm also like the dentist and the shoes and the this and that, you know, but he certainly feels plenty of pressure as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as a father of 3 daughters, I think my husband's very in tune to whatever they're feeling. Like you always say you're only as happy as your happiest child. And I think he feels that as well. I don't think it's just me. Mm-hmm. Although I definitely think I feel it more. Yeah.
Talia asks if either of you have any tips for aspiring writers who have yet to be published.
Keep going. Do not give up. I had this when I was a screenwriter, I had this entertainment lawyer who said to me multiple times, Jane, you never give up. You're going to make it. So just keep going. Like, that's it. If you give up, if something's not working, put it away. Just write something else. Just keep trying. I didn't publish my first book till I was 50.
I totally agree with Jane. Also, just read a lot, because I think reading is the best, you know, writing teacher out there.
Yes. And I would say even more than that also, besides reading, I would say go see plays, go watch art movies, just do cultural, expose yourself to everything.
No, I love that. Thank you. And thank you both for being here and for coming on. I'm going to let Marjorie do the outro.
That was a wonderful discussion between the 3 of you. I'm watching all of our chat questions and all the private texts I'm getting from various friends watching, and everybody is enjoying it so much. So thank you, Jordana, and thank you, Jane, and thank you, Elyssa. Now, a couple of things for everybody. Jane, the mutual friend we spoke about, sends her love, etc. We texted a little bit during. I sent her some photos. And I also enjoyed the restaurant. By the way, everybody should watch it. That was my favorite pandemic binge. Elyssa, your books are so wonderful. I have a friend who owned a hotel down in Cape May, and I sent her your book. They're very similar family story, and she loved your book.
Great.
All of your books, but she particularly loved that one as she looked into it. Jordana, thank you. You're a terrific moderator. And everybody on this Zoom, please join us for the next 5 Tuesdays. Next Tuesday, November 1st, we have Celeste Ng, whose new book is called Our Missing Hearts, and it is getting a tremendous amount of buzz. It's a Reese Witherspoon book and a Jenna Bush pick, and that should be a fascinating conversation. And I do want to also mention that later on the road, November 29th, we had Dani Shapiro with us, and I did just finish her book, and it's really wonderful also. So thank you, everybody, for watching, and please join us next week. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Wonderful. Thank you to everyone.
Bye.